What's up, guys? Danny here from the Lacercast, and we're back to talk about Cursed Films Season 2, Episode 3, about a movie that I didn't see, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there haven't seen as well, and that film is Stalker by legendary director Andrei Tarkovsky. Tarkovsky is a director. When I make a list of all the directors whose filmographies I really need to catch up on, he's usually near the top of that list. There's a lot of Hitchcock I need to get back to. There's some early Kubrick stuff that has slipped past me. And Tarkovsky's been one of those filmmakers whose work is always kind of on the periphery. Like, I've heard of Solaris my entire life, but I just never got a chance to sit down and watch it. So when I heard that this episode, going from The Wizard of Oz, one of the most famous films of all time, in episode 1, to Rosemary's Baby, one of the most famous horror films of all time, in episode 2, I was really looking forward, because there are a few movies that exist that A, I haven't seen, and B, I haven't heard of. So I was really excited about this episode. And I gotta say, this episode didn't disappoint. This might have been my favorite episode of the season so far. And I think it had to do with how interested I am in now going out and watching Stalker. In fact, I will save you the time. I looked it up. I searched my Roku. Stalker is available to watch right now on HBO Max. If you have an HBO Max subscription, just type in Stalker and you'll find it. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. I know that's an investment, but from everything I saw in this episode of Cursed Films, I'm going to make that investment. This movie looks really, really interesting, and I really enjoyed some of the stories that went along with it. First off, this movie starts with a disclaimer that a lot of the shots in this back in 2020 were done in the Ukraine, and they send love to the people in Ukraine that are obviously dealing with war and violence now at the hands of Russia. This movie was made by a Russian filmmaker during the age of the Soviet Union, and it takes place it was actually filmed in a city called Tallinn, which is the capital city of Estonia. Estonia was one of the many Soviet republics that earned their freedom when the Soviet Union collapsed. This film is a science fiction movie about a zone. There's this zone that is, you can't go into it. It's completely blocked off. Apparently in the film, they talk about how there was some kind of a UFO or alien-related incident. And so the zone you cannot go into unless you hire a stalker who will take you into the zone. And inside the zone, you look for the room. The room is this magical room that can grant you a wish to anything that you want. So just based on the plot synopsis, I was like, this sounds like a movie I would love to watch. In fact, I started to think, as they were describing that plot, I was like, this sounds like maybe some of the ideas for Annihilation took place, and they start showing a lot of modern films and how they've borrowed from the cinematography and from the stylized shooting of Tarkovsky in this film. One of the talking heads in here is two-time Oscar-winning cinematographer, somebody who's probably on the Mount Rushmore of cinematographers in film history, and that's Roger Deakins. Roger Deakins won the Oscar for Blade Runner 2049, and then he won a second Oscar for 1917. One of the best cinematographers of all time. He has a long list of Oscar nominations aside from his 2 wins, going back into the, I want to say, late 80s to early 90s. I know one of them was definitely going back to the early 90s. So he is one of the talking heads here. He even has a great line later on when they talk about how a lot of the people who worked on this film ended up getting very sick and their lives ending rather early. Deakins is asked, would he have crawled into toxic water to get a shot for Tarkovsky? And he basically says, knowing what I know now, probably not. But at the time, if a legend like Tarkovsky asked me to get into toxic water, yeah, probably for a shot. So that just goes to show you the respect that Tarkovsky had amongst the filmmaking community, and how much his name still resonates with modern day filmmakers and cinematographers and people in the industry. One of the talking heads is an author named Robert Bird, who is the author of Andrei Tarkovsky, Elements of Cinema. And at the very end of the episode, it has a, in memoriam to Robert Bird, which adds a weight on top of the whole cursed films aspect, because I mentioned some of the people who worked on this film and who were connected to it died. And for one of the talking heads that you're looking at, who's a young guy too, he looks like he's in his mid-40s, maybe early 50s, and to know that he passed away right after this was made is kind of eerie in and of itself. Before we get into the whole darker side with the deaths and the destruction, just a few cursed films things. They wanted to shoot in what is today Tajikistan, used to be part of the Soviet Union. Right as they had finished basically setting up their initial shots, there was a massive earthquake that pretty much destroyed all the land and space that they were going to film in, which is what required them to move the set to what is today modern-day Estonia. They filmed about 6 weeks of film before they ever looked at the daily rushes. And by the time they looked at them, because they would send them back to Moscow, by the time they looked at them, 6 weeks worth of film was done on this new type of film stock that they had from Kodak, and it was completely wasted. They various reports of either muddy green or watery green was seen on the screen. One of the other people who's interviewed, Gregory Verkovsky, who was a camera assistant on Stalker, the film, he talked about how it was maybe bright orange or red and how it kind of ruined everything. And basically, Tarkovsky had to go back and film the entire movie again. He also had a heart attack, which sent him to the hospital for a month, which set back everything. My favorite talking head here is a man named Arvo Iho. He is the biggest fan of Stalker that you could ever have. He worked himself into getting a job on set, and he worked with Tarkovsky, and he took pictures. But he's so excited to show us, the audience, some of the places where Stalker was filmed in Tallinn, Estonia. He's taking us around. This guy looks like he's in his mid-70s, maybe early 80s. He's hopping fences. He's so excited. He's like, come with me, I'll show you. And he hops a friggin' metal fence and goes to show you shooting locations. This was the beginning of the zone. This was where we filmed this scene. And it's really cool to have this guy who was there, who's so excited. You could tell he was just a monster Tarkovsky fan, and he got to actually work with him and talk to him and be a part of this filmmaking process, which was really interesting. Then we get into the real darker aspects of the cursed films elements. I know a lot of people had issues. Pete and I did too when we talked about the Rosemary's Baby episode, where they don't spend a lot of time talking about Rosemary's Baby as much as they do talking about the Manson family and things that happened way after, especially with one of the actresses who didn't really seem like she was in the right mental state to be filmed. This episode really tones that down. There's not anything in here that I feel could be considered controversial. They do talk about how there were tragedies. Two of the actors, there's 3 principal actors in the film. 2 of them died shortly after it was made. One of the photographers, a cameraman, even Tarkovsky's wife passed away right after the movie was made. And Tarkovsky himself He had a heart attack on set. He died in 1986, only 7 years after Stalker came out. And that 7 years connects to another major event of 1986, which was Chernobyl. The nuclear plant at Chernobyl in what is today the Ukraine. And that terrible tragedy, they make the connection where a lot of people look at Stalker as almost a prophetic film that predicted the Chernobyl accident, because you have basically now in modern day Chernobyl, they created a zone where you cannot go into it because of the high radiation. And that is effectively what the movie is about. There's this zone that you cannot go into. Humans are not allowed in. And they even show that today in the Ukraine, there are modern day stalkers who will take people on tours into Chernobyl and show them the sights the way that the stalker in the film is leading people to the room, the magical room in the middle. So it's really, I guess this is, my ignorance as an American, sometimes you get these great foreign films where when we get to see them here, we're like, oh, that was a great movie, but we don't really see how influential and how important those films are to the people where the movies are made. This is a Russian film, a Soviet film, that now that the Soviet Union is broken up, there's elements of this movie that trace back to Estonia, Ukraine, Tajikistan. These are, independent countries now. And it's really interesting to see how those people, these people who are going to Chernobyl and marching through radiated territory and, chancing radiation poisoning just to go on a tour. It's kind of crazy. They even mention one really kind of creepy thing in the movie. There's a scene where there's water and there's a calendar floating in the water, and the date on it is December 28th. And that's the last day that apparently Tarkovsky was alive, was December 28th. He died, I believe, December 29th of 1986, or December 28th, 1986. I didn't look up his death day, but that was one of the things they talked about in the video. As a Cursed Films episode, I don't know if I would rank this very high in terms of, like, if you turn this episode on expecting to hear, like, there were serial killers on set and there's the legends of ghost stories attached to, I don't think you're going to get what maybe you would think you're going to get with a Cursed Films episode. But I'm a film fan. I'm a foreign film fan. I live by the motto when it comes to movies: if you know how to read, you can watch foreign films. And I believe in you. I know you can read, so you can watch foreign films too. So I love this as a film, somebody who's into film history, somebody who's into cinema in general, somebody who's into movies that they've never seen. And the best thing I could say about this episode is when those 41 minutes ended, the first thought I had in my mind was, I gotta go on Roku and see if Stalker is streaming anywhere. And like I said at the beginning, it is streaming on HBO Max. If you don't have HBO Max, you can rent it on Prime or VUDU for, I think it's like $3 for a rental. I think it's also on the Criterion channel if you have that. So there's plenty of ways for you to get access to this film before or after you watch the Cursed Films episode on Shudder. Pete and I have been covering Shudder this whole month. We have a review of Cursed Films season episodes 1 on The Wizard of Oz, episode 2, which is done alongside our review of Serpent in the Rainbow. Charlotte and I did reviews of Halloween 3 and Candyman. We have so much stuff coming up. Next week is 4/26, Alien Day. Pete and I are going to be reviewing Memory, Origin of Alien, a great documentary, which is also streaming on Shudder right now. So yeah, celebrating Shudder and halfway to Halloween month. Also at the end of next week, next Friday, 1 week from today, is the last drive-in with Joe, Bob, and Darcy, the return. So we have that to look forward to as well. So this has been Danny from the Lacercast. Watch Shudder, watch Cursed Films. What did you think of this episode? Do you want to watch Stalker? Are you interested in this movie? Do you like foreign sci-fi films, foreign horror films? Let me know, and I'll talk to you very soon.